Hey everyone, John here, welcome back. In this Sapphire tutorial, I'm going to break down one of the Sapphire Effect presets I created for Sapphire version 2026. It's called Celluloid Memories and includes a range of different Sapphire effects plus the new FilmBurn effect. Let's take a look. So I'm here in After Effects, but this is the same preset no matter which host you're using. So I'll just apply it and click on Load Preset, and you'll find it in the New category. You can always type in search presets here, but it's this one just down here, Celluloid Memories. So I'll click on Load. And as with all Sapphire presets, inside the host, you'll see the parameters that have been turned on inside of the Sapphire Effect Builder. And generally what we try to do is just make available the minimum amount of parameters that you will find the most useful. So let's just quickly walk through these, and then we'll go inside the builder and look at what's going on in there. So I set this up in a way where you can use a mask, and the first parameter is mask color. So why don't we do that? We'll set up a mask first. Now in After Effects here, I've got this text called dramatic. So this layer with some text, and I'm going to turn that off. And for mask from layer, I'm going to choose dramatic. Now, nothing happened. All right. So this is why I wanted to do this tutorial, just to make sure that you don't, get caught up by these things. The way to see the mask is to come under ABCD Composite and increase mask opacity. And now we can see it. Now, the reason I set it up that way, let me just turn that off, is because if I left mask opacity at 1, this is what you're going to see when you apply the effect. And I thought it was a bug when I was testing this particular setup. So I thought the best thing to do is just to leave that at 0. And when you apply the mask, you can increase the opacity down here. And we'll see how that's set up inside the builder in a moment. So I'll make that 1. And currently, as this is set up, there's no way to reposition this mask using Sapphire Effect, but we'll go into the builder and set that up in a moment. But you can select the layer inside your host. I'm just going to use the Shift and arrow key and just maybe move that up a little bit, away from her eye. But we'll reposition this again in a moment using the warp transform effect, because I think this is a little bit slow. Okay, so let's just come back up. So that's mask color. Maybe we could change that to something that matches it. Actually, that looks quite nice, isn't it? Something green or some red. You could sample something from the actual footage itself, like that. Okay. Next is sprocket color. Pretty self-explanatory. Because you can change the names of categories and parameters inside the builder, we've just named these in a way that make them as descriptive as possible. So I just chose this color because it's nice and bright and it looks like light is shining through. You can change that if you want to. Now for source look, this is actually Sapphire FilmEffect. And the reason I've used FilmEffect is because it has loads of different film look presets which you can choose, but you can't choose them inside the host. You have to go into the builder for that, and we'll look at that in a minute. But I've given you a scale color correction parameter here visible, and it's also a vignette, which I thought looks quite nice as well. It just darkens around the outside a little bit. Beneath that is film damage, and inside Sapphire 2026 we have FilmBurn, which actually has a few of the same parameters that film damage has, things like hair and stains, but FilmBurn doesn't have things like defocus and flicker. So I've applied those and things like saturation to the shot at this stage, and I'm actually using the FilmBurn a little bit later down here. And this is the thing about Sapphire Effects, right? You can combine a whole bunch of different effects and just use the parts of each effect that you want to create your own Uber effect. Under that is Grunge. So while FilmBurn itself and film damage has some grungy things, like I said, things like hairs and stains, the grunge effect itself has way more stamps, grungy stamps. So I use grunge just to give an overall sort of dirty look to the film. It's a little hard to see there. If I just bring that up, give it a moment, because this is quite an intense effect. You can see how we've got some dirt in there. And this is laid over the whole thing, right? So it just, in my opinion, made it feel like, the film has been left in a box, for decades, or, has been handled, or it just feels much older and much more real. I'm just going to undo that. And here also, you can't choose the actual stamps that you want to see. You have to do that inside the builder. We'll look at that in a moment. So we've already looked at ABCD composite. That's the mask opacity. Now this is warp transform. I've named it roll because this is the function that I want it to be used for. Don't worry about the X. The X will move it to the left and the right, which is maybe what you want, but maybe not. But the Y, if I just increase that, will roll this because this is set to tile inside of Sapphire Builder. So as you can imagine, you can keyframe that to create really nice title reveals. We'll have a look at that inside the builder in a moment as well. Underneath that, we have shake and motion blur. Now here I've used Sapphire Shake, the individual Sapphire Shake effect, not the one inside Film Damage, to add some motion blur to this as well. So this is, imagine the film is rolling, but then it's also sort of jumping as well. And this adds that effect to it as well. You may not want any roll, but you might just want it to jump a little bit. And beneath that, we have Sapphire FilmBurn, new in Sapphire 2026. And here, all I'm doing is using the flashes. And I've just made the checkboxes for those available in here. You can see that one a little darker there. Let's turn that back on. And also the brightness amount. So that's flash 2. So if I just bring that up, then flash 2 will be much brighter, okay? Give you kind of a burning effect. And as I mentioned, all of these things can be further adjusted inside the builder. There's Ultra Glow, a little bit of Ultra Glow over the top of everything because Ultra Glow makes everything look better. All right, so now let's go into the builder and take a further look. And to open up Sapphire Builder, I'll click Edit Effect. Okay, so I'm actually in vertical mode. You can choose that by choosing View, Vertical Window Layout. It's a bit easier to see what's going on here. And let's start at the top. So previous selected node is selected in my case. If it's not, just turn that on if you're walking through this. And click on source. So there's my source footage. So we'll go very quickly through this. I want to just give you an idea about how it's created. But the main thing I want to do is point out the things that you might want to change in here that you can't change in the host. And underneath that, we have set alpha. So this is using Sapphire shape with some soft, with a soft feather. So that's actually blur and a little bit of Sapphire threshold. And this is one of the things about Sapphire, right? Sapphire shape doesn't have rounded corner rectangles, not yet. And I thought, well, how can I make that? So spent a bit of time experimenting in Sapphire and worked out a way. And that literally was by blurring shape and applying threshold, which gave me these kind of rounded corners here. And when I used that as the matte, it was exactly what I was looking for. So I was able to solve it just inside Sapphire Effect Builder. So that's the matte. And beneath that, we have Sapphire FilmEffect. Remember, I talked about this a moment ago. And I also mentioned that you should try different presets. There is a little note here, try different FilmEffect presets to change the look. So keep an eye out for these kind of notes because we put them in there on purpose to make these things more discoverable. So let's click on Load Preset inside SFilmEffect. And all of the thumbnails look the same. And this is a bit of a gotcha. This is because we've chosen the mask inside the host. So I'm going to cancel that. And I'm just going to click OK. And just for a moment, I'm going to just turn off the mask. Okay? And remember, we talked about the fact that at 1 makes it go, fully opaque. I'm going to bring that down to 0. And I'm going to come back in and edit effect. Okay, so now I'll click on Film Effect again. Click on Load Preset. Now you can see they're working, right? Well, they were working before, but they were applying the look to the masked area of the footage. And that's why it was so hard to see because it's such tiny text. So here you've got a huge range of film looks that you can choose from. So rather than trying to create your own film look, I thought by using Sapphire FilmEffect, you can take advantage of this library of looks. So, I mean, I can choose anything here. Why don't I just choose, let's see, alien, for example, something a little bit darker, make the text a little easier to read. So click on load, and there we go. So once again, that's not available inside the host. You have to come into Sapphire Effect Builder to choose that. Beneath that, we have film damage. Remember I said that some of these features like dust and hair, stains, grain are inside Sapphire FilmBurn as well. But here I wanted to take advantage of things like flicker and defocus. So I've added that in and I've turned everything else off. You can see it's all zeroed out, but I've just made those available inside the host. I'm just going to leave those settings. You can play around with those. Now, to the right of that is film color. So this is Sapphire color, just a utility effect. And that's composited into the background using Sapphire layer. And everything we've just looked at is composited into the foreground. So this gives us that film around the outside of the footage, okay? So you could change the color, but I thought something not black, but fairly dark gray works best. There's our Sapphire Grunge. And remember I said the stamps are available inside of the builder. So to choose a different stamp, just come down to the stamps. There's stamp 1, 2, and 3. I've used a couple of the new stamps that are in Sapphire 2026, but you can choose from a huge range of stamps there, scratches, all kinds of things, and with lots of different parameters to really fine-tune your grungy look. Okay, so you choose those there. That's composited into the background using Sapphire layer again. And in the foreground are the sprockets. Now to create the sprockets, I've used Sapphire FilmBurn with edges turned on, and under edges, there's sprockets options, okay? So I've used Sapphire color into Sapphire FilmBurn to make them white, and I've used that into Sapphire Set Alpha, and there's the color that we saw in the host, and that's in the foreground. So composited together, there's everything we've looked at, and there's the sprockets on the side, okay? And there's one more, and this is the one which I'm compositing the mask into. So there's everything we've looked at, this whole section here, composited into the background using S layer. And here's our mask. So remember we turned it off. It's piped into the mask color. Remember we set the color there. We sampled it from the footage using Set Alpha, and that's in the foreground, okay? So we'll turn that on again in a second. And that's the final composite. And then we've got a few effects on top of that. So things like roll. This is using warp transform. You can see there's the parameter that I've changed to roll. And there's a couple of other parameters in here which I wasn't sure whether I wanted to make available to you in the host, but I thought I'd point them out anyway. Things like rotate, swivel, and tilt. Take a look at this. If I swivel this footage, see, look, you could do that, and then you could tilt it like that. And because it's set to tile on the Y, if you do things like roll, you can do that kind of look. How cool is that? But I just wasn't sure whether I wanted to make those available in the host. I didn't want to confuse you as a user. But once again, this is why I wanted to do the tutorial to point this out. That actually looks pretty good, doesn't it? I'm just going to undo that. And if you did like that and you wanted to make it available in the host, maybe I'll do that now. You could just turn these on, okay? So that's Sapphire Warp Transform. And I mentioned also a little bit of shake and motion blur using Sapphire Shake. Again, there's another option which you can't make available in the host, which is style. And I've chosen twitchy. There's also jumpy, so you could choose that in here as well. Sapphire FilmBurn. You can see I've turned almost everything off. I've just kept the flashes. Flash 1 is turned off in the host, but I could always turn that back on here. And there's a whole bunch of parameters in here which you could turn on. And there's Ultra Glow, just with the parameters that are made available in the host. Now, there's one other thing I wanted to point out, and I mentioned this earlier. It's the current inability with this setup to move the mask around. So why don't we do this first? We'll click OK. And what I'll do is I will turn on my mask. and come to my ABCD composite and make that 1. Okay, looking good. That pink still looks quite good with that. It's quite bright here, but of course I could do things like, decrease the brightness of the ultra glow. There's certain things I can do to make that pop out a little bit better. Maybe make it actually come back to mask color. Maybe make it a little, a little lighter, just to make it pop out like that. Let's go back into the builder. And we want to set up something that allows us to move this text using Sapphire Effect and the Effect Builder rather than having to do it in the host. So how can we do that? I know exactly how. That's what I'm going to show you. So we want to move the mask, right? So the best thing to do is select the mask, hit the Tab key, type in Transform, choose Sapphire Warp Transform, and here you've got things like Scale, Shift, and I want Shift, right? But notice how there's this little yellow triangle. This is a little warning to say that you've exhausted the parameters which you can view in the host. So what do? I have to decide which are the most useful parameters in the host. It's not unlimited. And in this case, I think being able to move this in the host would be very useful. And now that we know that ABCD composite, the mask is all set up, and we know that really we're only using that for mask opacity, we could actually toggle this on and off like that. And that frees that up. So if I come back to here, so now it's freed up. So now I can actually use this. So why don't I make Shift X and Y and maybe Scale available in the host. I could even use Rotate, Swivel, and Tilt here too if I wanted to. So that's great. If I wanted to move it here, you can see, there you go, I can move that there. But now that they're available in the host, I can do that in the host. All right, so I'm going to click OK. It's going to tell me that keyframes will be cleared. And this is the kind of thing you want to do before you set any keyframes in the host, because you don't want those keyframes to be cleared. Because really, you're making quite fundamental changes to visible parameters, and there's no way you can keep the keyframes in the host if you're doing that. And you see it move that down a little bit. So if we come to Warp Transform 1, we'd probably want to name it a little differently. There's our parameters. So I can now move this without having to touch the layer in the host, and I can get that right in the right position. Let me bring that down. Maybe I want to take it to the left. I've got X and Y, so I could take it across. Obviously, you don't want to have things on her nose or covering the talent. But just wanted to point out that you can fine-tune that now inside the builder. So that's how you can customize the effect. So let's finish this off by taking a look at how you can set a few keyframes to create a rolling effect. So I'll just twirl up this one and twirl open roll. Now, these kind of things are best to create in reverse. So I want it to finish in its default. So I'll just reset that like that, and want it to be fairly quick. So I'll just go somewhere around there, set a keyframe for roll. And it might look nice if it rolls down, then it overshoots a bit, then rolls back. So maybe I'll just drag that one a bit further. In After Effects, I'll just make the same value keyframe like that. And I'll just bring this down a bit. So let's see, let's bring it down on the Y, just like, maybe like that, just a little bit. So between that keyframe and that keyframe, it'll roll back up into position. And then from here, I want it to be going upwards, not on the X, on the Y. So I want it to be this way. So I'll just bring it just to a minus value. Just have a quick look at that. I'm going to bring it down in After Effects here down to about 1/4 and just preview that. So it rolls down because we've got the tiling turned on in Warp Transform, then it just bounces back up like that. Isn't that nice? So we go, zip, and it's a little slow, so just grab those keyframes, bring them back there like that. Something like that. And that's how I designed this to work. And see how the mask is working with it, because the mask is built into the effect. And something to keep in mind too, I mean, in After Effects you can do this. I'm sure you can do this in other hosts as well. You could animate the text either by animating it here, or because we've used Warp Transform here, you could scale it up. You could have the text, shift on as this is rolling into place. There's a whole bunch of things you could do with this to make this look even more complex, but really simply. And one other thing you might want to do in your host is just to add like a motion blur effect after this, something that gives it a bit of motion blur. Let's also take a look at these ones here. Remember we turned on swivel and tilt? Now that we've set that up, if we swivel that, tilt it, it should still work, and it does. So you could even set keyframes for those and then have it end up back at its default position just by resetting that for those second keyframes. So it's a little bit longer than I thought, this tutorial, but there's a lot going on in this effect, and I thought that by just digging a little bit deeper, that might make it even more useful for you. You can learn more about Sapphire by visiting the Boris Effects website, where you can also download a free trial. For now, this is John. See you in the next tutorial.